All three bullies, spellbooks opened and bookmarked, took position in front of Adam, who hadn't moved since he first appeared. In fact, his hands were still in his pockets. A brief flash, and then a ball of fire the size of a baseball appeared in front of Stefan and hurtled towards Adam. A silver snake with wings appeared from the third bully's spellbook and darted in the same direction. In a single movement, Andy broke his contract with the waltzing river dino, causing it to seemingly flicker out of existence, and produced a thin whip of pure blue lightning that he sent crackling towards Sam's prostrate form. Still no movement from Adam, but Sam felt the pressure almost extend from where Adam was standing, as though the very air itself were bending. While Adam did not move, Sam felt as though Adam's will was a tangible force flowing through him like a current. The fireball, a mere 3 feet from making impact, expanded in size until it became so thin that it disappeared with a poof. The winged silver snake screeched before tying itself into a knot and exploding in a flash. For the lightning whip, which almost certainly would have blown a golf ball-sized hole in Sam's back, it stopped mid-flight and hung suspended in the air as though someone had taken a photo of the lightning bolt right before striking a tree.
You actually have skill, Andy. Try and use it on someone other than my brother,
Adam said almost nonchalantly. Or focus it on cosmetics, Sam thought bravely from his curled-up ball. With the magic from their spells dissipating into the air like steam, the bullies stood stunned as though they themselves had been struck by blue lightning. They had known that Adam was skilled, but to cast such powerful defensive spells without a spellbook, let alone without moving a muscle, it was enough to make anyone run, and run they did. Sam attempted to slowly raise himself off the ground, grunting with the effort. Through clenched teeth said, "What exactly are you doing, Adam? Not that I'm..." Before seemingly out of nowhere, Rose appeared by his side.
"Sam, these cuts are horrible. Please don't move."
Rose immediately began to apply medical magic. A soft green hue spilled forth from her fingertips like murky water and gently caressed Sam's wounds. Okay, so what exactly is happening? You two are always at school by now," Sam sputtered.
"Sam, how long has this been happening?" "Certainly not,"
Rose began.
It doesn't matter. He can take care of himself. Sam, we need to talk.
Adam was practical, beyond practical, and he was certainly not stupid. He knew the embarrassment Sam must be feeling at that exact moment, and he knew the best thing to do was move on. Besides, he clearly had something important to say. At that very moment, M exited the house carrying 2 heavy and well-loved suitcases to the curb.
"Oh, you're already here! What the... Sam, get off the ground. You're ruining your good school clothes. Spells can only rebind fabric so many times."
Clearly M knew something had happened, but maybe he figured that the drama that had unfolded moments before was something that should remain in the realm of the teenagers that stood before him. Making a vexed sound at the interruption, Adam always did see M as a bit goofy despite M's immense magical powers. Adam continued.
Look, Sam, when Rose and I got to school this morning, our daily casting exercises were interrupted by a recruiter from Quimbleys.
Sam's eyes widened, and to be completely honest, Adam's did as well as he was repeating what still struck him as extraordinary. Quimbleys was the state-sanctioned college for magic located in Unity City. It was basically the real-world version of Hogwarts and was based out of the husk of Georgetown University's campus, which had burned down in the attacks immediately following the shattering of the Veil. Not surprisingly, some high potential casters were located in and around which was once DC, so when the Veil shattered, the level of destruction was tremendous. But then again, so was the reconstruction effort that followed. "I don't understand. Don't you have to be 18 to go to college?" Sam asked.
"Not necessarily. In fact, I know quite a few casters younger than the 3 of you who are already attending Quimbleys,"
interjected M with a sly smile.
"So what?" Sam continued.
"The recruiter shows up and you leave the same day? What the hell is that?"
Adam averted his eyes from Sam's in a way that was uncharacteristically sheepish. Sam immediately came to the correct conclusion.
You've known about this for a while. The three of you have. Without telling me, you guys were just going to leave me, Sam said with not a little despair in his voice. How Adam had hidden this from Sam, given their connection, would be a mystery that haunted Sam for months. Sam, it's Quimbley's. It's like Hogwarts, Rose began. I know what it is, Jesus. I guess that just makes me the Dursley of the family. Sam's cheeks bloomed roses once again as he realized just how vulnerable his anger at the situation made him, and what it exposed about his very different love for both Rose and Adam. In this instance, he should have cared less about the self-image he was cultivating for Rose, a girl he wouldn't see for many years. But teenage hormones are a strange thing. A long pause, and then without missing a beat and just as cheery as ever, M softly spoke in a way that carried through the air farther than it should have.
Let's go then, or we'll be late. Time to say your goodbyes.
Adam, who had just turned with a jolt at the sound of the whisper, turned back in a hurry to explain what had happened to Sam in more detail, timing and being late be damned. But Sam was already turning the corner down the block, running faster than he had ever before. Sam was 18, and he was weeks away from graduating high school. He sat in his room at roughly 12 a.m., preparing his tools to leave through his bedroom window. It had been 2 years since Rose and Adam had left him, left his family, and not all of his fears of loneliness had come true. Adam never wrote a single letter to Sam, and vice versa, but Sam had spied Adam's handwriting on more than one piece of paper that M had been reading through the years. Of course, at second glance, the handwriting would always change, accompanied by that sly smile M was always fond of showing. Rose was a different matter entirely. While Sam wouldn't call them love letters, their correspondence could have filled an entire desk drawer, and it did. In the years since she had left, Sam had gotten to know Rose better than he had when they were sitting next to each other for hours each day. This level of connection made the disappearance of Adam from Sam's world easier to manage. The bits and pieces of information about Adam he had been able to glean from Rose's letters pointed to the fact that they were both considered prodigies, even among Quimbley's prodigies. Anything more was shrouded in mystery. And in the ways only the young can, when summers stretch for an eternity and a year is all that is needed to become a new person, Sam moved on from the fact that his two best friends had left him in his small town to go on an adventure. The chasm between 16 years of age and 18 is something that is hard to fathom. One thing that had not changed, though, was Sam's love for all things cryptid. He had at some point in the last 2 years upgraded from petty theft of the local poster industry to full-on cryptid hunting. Now, Sam's definition of cryptid hunting was perhaps more innocent than you might think. Unlike many of the casters looking to expand the powers of their spellbook, or the cryptid product specialists looking to research a new facial cream, Sam merely liked to take photos for his personal collection. Of course, he had the many posters of superstars like Bigfoot, Mothman, and the Jersey Devil that papered his bedroom walls. However, Sam had made every effort to take photos of more obscure cryptids, like the various breeds of devil dogs that recently moved to the outskirts of the town. These were his true pride and joy, despite no one being interested in branding a new line of toys or toothpaste based on them. Gadgets and gizmos in various states of disrepair littered the room like a museum to the 1980s, and a tribute to the fact that Sam relied on technology more than magic. It was hard to get anything more advanced than analog up and running these days, but Sam found himself to be quite the technological whiz. Sam picked up a vintage Zenit E from the Soviet era that he had recently refurbished, and for whatever reason captured paranormal activity perfectly, and then he zipped up his JanSports backpack. Sam had recently found himself sneaking out of his bedroom window and scaling the gutter in order to investigate a puzzling development. The cloak and daggers was a necessity, born from the fact that Sam wasn't allowed out past dusk. Unless, of course, he trained how to cast with M, something Sam still stubbornly refused to do. The puzzling development was that the level of spirit activity on the outskirts of Point Pleasant had multiplied tenfold in the past 2 weeks. Now, M and the other local casters had put up barriers around Point Pleasant that prevented spirits and more powerful cryptids from entering city limits. And those barriers were powerful. Many towns were not so lucky, and for cities that were built on the buried corpses of sometimes millions of people, the shattering of the veil released armies of spirits unto the world that were impossible to exorcise. As a result, many larger cities were abandoned, and even smaller towns required power casters to create magical countermeasures. The rest of the US population resorted to a nomadic lifestyle, moving from place to place until too many friends and loved ones died, making the presence of spirits once again unbearable. Point Pleasant was no exception, and following the shattering of the veil and the resulting explosion, there were certainly enough spirits wandering around to make life less than comfortable. However, with the help of M, who handled the awakening of his powers almost suspiciously well, the small town of Point Pleasant had successfully installed a magical barrier only 3 days after the veil shattered. In the months that followed, many of the surviving residents would visit the barrier that bordered the town in an attempt to see if they could spot a loved one in the crowd of spirits. This practice led to one too many suicides and attempts to improperly cross the barrier. Only 6 months after the veil shattered, the Council of Casters, created by M, cast a series of spells that removed the spirits' faces and obscured their voices. The spirits passed once again into the background of daily life, ever present but more like features of the town's outer landscape than something people had to actively worry about. But something had changed. More and more spirits had appeared at the barrier in the past several weeks, but this wasn't what was most troubling. What was the most troubling was the fact that some of these spirits had crossed the barrier and would be found wandering this forest of Point Pleasant. When Sam probed M for the potential causes of this, especially since M himself had put the barrier in place, M responded with a textbook explanation.
Sam, all barriers are veils themselves, and there are many types of veils. These veils are usually meant to obscure something, or to keep something out, or outright remove it from what we define as existence. In fact, the ability for a caster to form a contract with a cryptid and summon and dismiss it at will is done by enveloping it in a compact veil that's stored in their spellbook. But Sam, who had heard this a million times in various classes, news reports, books, and other forms of exposition, was trying to make another point.
"Why only some spirits?" Sam asked. M only looked at Sam, knowing there was another part of the question.
"And why do they have faces no one has ever seen?"
finished Sam. The spirits that passed M's barrier had faces when they shouldn't, and those impossible faces showed up on no digital database that had survived the veil shattering. And each night, the faces were always different, and the spirits had always vanished before morning's first light. M thought for a moment, and stared at something in the distance Sam could never quite see.
"Sam, all veils are imperfect, and let's just leave it at that."
So, M didn't know, and that excited Sam as much as it scared him.